Director Simonson.
Here.
Director Kelly.
Here.
Director Woolley. Here. Director Colfax. Director Olivier.
Here.
Director Myers.
Here.
Director McDonald.
Here.
Director Zedrick. Chairman Hempel.
Here. Thank you. I'll now call for approval of the agenda.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Second. Any further discussion on the agenda? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Please stand, please. I'm sorry.
I just learned, I think our council can't make it today because of an emergency. So that would probably, are we then, usually we can't have closed sessions without council.
He's planning on conferencing in.
Oh, he is?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we'll now move to the conduct of business. Oh, I'm sorry. Let's skip right over public comment. We now invite public comment, and please speak to subjects at this point in the meeting that are not on the agenda. There'll be ample time to speak to items that are on the agenda at that point in time, and if we limit the comments to 3 minutes with respect to the time that we have to take them today, it would be very much appreciated. Identify yourself, if you will.
My name is Jerry Tomzak. I live in Eureka. I'm also a member of the Timber Heritage Association on the Tourist and Excursion Committee. I'd like to thank John Williams for sending a crew up here to help clear some of the brush on the track between Samoa and Arcata. And there was quite a bit of it cleared with our assistance, that is volunteers from Timber Heritage Association, and it will enable us with a little bit additional clearing to possibly offer some sort of an excursion, possibly with our Arcata and Mad River cruise speeder, which was recently restored. I'd like to continue to urge that the North End still be considered a viable entity in the redevelopment of the NWP. We want to put an excursion train, that is the Timber Heritage Association, around the bay, and at least from Eureka to Samoa and on to South Fork if and when that area is cleared. And we need the NWP to be the operator of the railroad and to maintain the crossings and maintain the tracks. I know that there are a number of viable commercial entities that could use the railroad, so I strongly urge that they continue, you continue your efforts, NCRA, in development of the railroad all the way to the north end. I'd like to point out a couple things. People talk about money. I just looked at the local newspaper, the Times Standard, which is now the only newspaper in the area, daily newspaper that is, and I found some facts about the Confusion Hill bypass. That project is $70 million. And I also found out that they spent, the Caltrans spent another $30 million for maintenance of the highway over the past 10 years, just keeping it open. And District 1 expenditures for the highway, which includes Del Norte, Humboldt, Lake, and Mendocino counties, last year was $160 million. That was just maintenance and repair of the highways. So a lot of money is spent on the highways, but we need a little bit more money spent on the railroads, on the railroad, so that we can have some decent jobs up here in the North Country. And in these economic times, jobs are important, and we need them. So continue your efforts, gentlemen, and thank you for your efforts so far.
Thank you.
My name is Barbara Kelly, and I'm here to support Kay Strickland and also give my own comment, very short comment as well. Kay Strickland is sick because she has infection in her leg, so that's why she couldn't be here. And she was in the hospital with it, so it's fairly severe and she can't drive yet. So she says, we must continue our effort to bring this railroad back all the way through the Elk Canyon to Humboldt Bay and around to Samoa. Please don't give up any of the NCRA right-of-way or let any track be removed for any trail. Economic stimulus that is so much needed up here in our little environmentally sensitive green corner of California. Good, stable living wage jobs, people, families, school children being able to live here and stay here. And my comment is that my advice about the railroad is to save all the pieces. I'm a trail user and advocate. I like living near the popular Hammond Trail. I want to see the trail near the bay, but not at the expense of the railroad tracks. France and Spain are way ahead of us in constructing and using railroads, and we need to catch up. I grew up in Los Angeles and took the electric streetcar before it was purchased and dismantled by Detroit automakers. It shows how old I am. Please do not make that type of mistake here. In transportation, as well as any other type of planning, the first rule is to save all the pieces. We are sure to need them before long. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and express our best wishes to Katie get well. Just a comment, we are going to be dealing with a staff report on the trail issue later in the meeting, so
I'm sorry, did I
that's
have
okay.
another?
Just like everybody kind of play by the rules if they was. Thank you.
That was actually my question. Are you going to have public comment during the staff reports for the railroad trail? Okay. Thank you.
Carlos Quiles from Fortuna, California. I have a letter that I'm going to submit to, so who would I give it to?
Our Secretary, Executive Director,
I also want to read it into the record. This letter is submitted on behalf of the board and members of Friends of Small Places. On October 8, 2008, the NCRA entered into a lease agreement between NCRA and Jack Noble for construction of a road along the NCRA right-of-way in Carlotta. This lease agreement is subject to environmental review under CEQA. The NCRA, as it has become its custom, did not conduct environmental review prior to the approval of this agreement. Under the California Environmental Quality Act, a public agency must prepare environmental impact report on any project that may have significant effect on the environment. This project clearly has significant effect. The road construction will impact traffic. This is inherent on all roads. The road will cross a stream which has been seen to be habitat for steelhead, and apparently there has been no communication with Fish and Game on how to handle the stream crossing. The road necessitates vegetation removal, and again, no consultation with Fish and Game. The road and the stream could cause stream bed alterations, including channelization and possible fill. CEQA requires environmental review before any such project is approved. And there are no county, water quality, board, fish or game permits associated with this project. It is clear from the lease agreement that the road is going to be used to move aggregate from Mr. Noble's mine. Mr. Noble's county permit calls for the use of 2 haul routes and contains nothing about trucking on a new road over the railroad right-of-way. Thus, his conditional use permit is going to have to be modified. Further, it's puzzling that the agreement was entered into on October 1st, 2008, several days prior to the NCRA board even approving it. Friends of Small Places asked that the NCRA rescind its approval of this project until there has been a complete review required under CEQA and until this project is compliant with California law. Do I still have any time left?
We're getting close.
Okay, well, I guess on a lighter note is you guys have been snookered because you were promised 250,000 cubic yards. The permit only allows 100,000 cubic yards, and CHIRP typically limits that to 60,000. So you guys got yourself into litigation territory over a grand total of $6,000 per year. Thank you.
Thank you. We're not going to deal with this now, Bernie. We'll just refer to council.
Could I ask a question of Mr. Anderson?
And
Certainly.
push the button here. When the light is on.
Push it again. Light is on. For Dave Anderson or Heather, did the contract that we modified get signed by Mr. Noble? Okay, that's number one. And number two is the contract is not dated October 1, so you might want to. I know it was
I
dated.
saw that on the on your own minutes.
That's right, but the contract was modified after that, so you want to check because at least that issue has been dealt
Well,
with.
then you need to bring the modifications back onto the public for public review.
We're going to deal with this.
Yeah, I don't want to really deal with this right now. This is a.
They're minor modifications.
Minor or major doesn't matter. You still have to bring this up for public review. You've been trying to slide away from CEQA.
Okay, that's
pretty much
enough.
in all your activities.
The next speaker, please.
Good morning, board members. Marcus Brown, Timber Heritage. And Mike Kellogg and I just got back from the annual Tourist Railroad Convention in Milwaukee, hosted by Trains Magazine. And, one of the things that we discussed a bit is the whole energy efficiency issue of trains. And in the tourist railroad industry, we're kind of this little tiny group that's kind of attached to the whole railroad scene. And we talked about just, there's nobody really out there advocating for trains, and the fact that trains are also a green technology. And the relative figures of how many miles per gallon you get with different forms of transportation. And in fact, trains are a green technology because they're the most efficient way of moving things on land. And that's why, for myself, I'm advocating the position that there is a way to have both trails and rails, and we don't want to throw out one green technology to have another, just, we can have win-win. At any rate, just yesterday, there was a thing right here about this little cruise speeder that our volunteers have restored. Jerry Tomzak has been leading that effort. And, I wanted to thank Dave Anderson for his efforts and everybody's efforts to get our first mile of track cleared of vegetation so that next spring we can start our little train rides, our first little train ride with this cruise speeder. And I also wanted to put in a plug for our tomorrow night's first Novemberfest, Oktoberfest in November, our fall fundraiser. So I'll have some flyers and I have tickets too, $25 a piece if anybody's interested. So I'm also really glad to see the lawsuit is resolved. I got a sense of just how much that these kinds of harassing things really mess up any efforts to try and get anything done. So I hope we can keep moving things forward. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Cynthia Noble, and I live in Philbrook. And I'd just like to say I support the infinite possibilities that the railroad will open up. We need mass transit in all forms. We can look at the rest of the world for examples of this form of transportation. And I'd like to encourage you to get the railroad going as soon as possible. Thank you for your efforts.
Thank you.
Good morning, gentlemen. My name is Nadananda with Friends of the Eel River. I just want to make a comment that a couple of comments. We're very concerned about the lack of the environmental studies that are being done. It is not for harassment. They are studies that are a tool to be used so that we can take care of problems before they occur. The Eel River Canyon is littered with problems that have never even been taken care of. And to study both the FEMA report from '98 and what they are saying needs to be done to make the railroad through the canyon safe, workable, and long-term stability, has some very good suggestions and how to deal with the problems in the canyon. They are expensive, but they spread out through the lifetime of the railroad. Hopefully it would be a long lifetime. Would probably save taxpayers money in the long run if it were handled in that fashion. To keep looking at CEQA as a harassment belies the understanding of what CEQA really is about. It's not to stop the railroad, it's to assist the general public and the railroad on making informed decisions on how to best proceed. The images left by the continued delays of promised environmental reports is that there's shenanigans going on, and indeed the way the contracts with John Williams are written, it looks more like a giveaway of the people's property, and we're very concerned of a closed session re-looking at John Williams's contract, and are asking you to please make sure that it is public before it is signed and agreed to. We wish you well in your attempts to get the railroad going, and we will remain vigilant in that you do look at it through the environmental lens of CEQA and not allow it to go under federal jurisdiction where the state will lose control of the NCRA and then be under federal law where nothing has to be done. You owe it to the general public up here. This is a very important economic vehicle for the county, and if it is done with a just $70,000 or even $70 million is way short of what the real cost will be, and you will destroy this area economically by trying to set up a delivery system of items coming in through a port and never making it to their destination because it goes off of ill-prepared tracks. There's a long history of this in the canyon, and that is why these studies are so important. There's never been studies on how to best fix it other than the FEMA report, and I ask you to please take that report seriously. We the people take it very seriously and see that that's the only way you can really get through the canyon. We're not trying to stop you from getting through the canyon. We're trying to stop you from going in and just grabbing rock and gravel out of there for someone's quick pocket money and just playing games with the rest of the public. So we look forward to any closed session negotiations with John Williams to please be made public before they are signed. Thank you.
And thank you for your comments, and it's gratifying to hear that you do support the reopening of the railroad, and reciprocally you should understand that this board is on record in terms of there being no action taken on the Eel River Canyon until a full environmental impact report is done. And in fact, we've spent, what, up to almost $2 million so far? Three so far on the beginning stages. And we're dedicated to not doing anything. We're not going to start the operations on the southern end of the line until the environmental impact report that we've spent pretty close to $1 million on, I guess, is issued, which will be shortly. So we know what CEQA is, and we understand and respect it, and we appreciate your comments.
Mr. Hemphill, does that also include the geological studies that you've done? Would that also be in those reports? Thank you. We look forward to seeing them.
You're welcome.
Good morning. My name is Patricia Daly. I live in Humboldt County. Eleanor Berg and I come to these railroad meetings, and why? Because we give you our full support. We need the railroad. Anyone in opposition of the railroad is being irresponsible. And I'm glad that Marcus brought up the point, the economics of railroads. All the new language, Green. Just keep doing and keep working at bringing this railroad up here. We need it. It's the most responsible thing we can do. And don't let the other side hassle you. They want to stop everything. They don't want anybody living on our planet, only them. We need the railroad. It's the right thing to do. Bring it up. And thank you for all your effort and your help.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers?
Hi, I'm Jessica Virginelli from Fortuna. I've been to various of your meetings and the Bay Commission meetings and the Board of Supervisors meetings, and I guess I just have not ever heard anybody come right out and say the train's going to be for people. Like just passengers moving from A to B to Z. And that's why this gentleman with the hat over here, he kind of hit it on the nose saying that trains are moving things on land. And I think that should be made clear that this is just how I understand it, that it's moving gravel and things and not people. And I think there's a lot of the public are misled, and they really wish there could be a train for people, as we all would, for heaven's sakes. But I still, of all the meetings and the officials that I've heard, not anybody say anything that it would be for people, but just for things. Thank you for your time.
I don't know whether the papers from Sonoma County get up here or Marin, but we just had a majority vote down there for passenger trains, and we're cooperating with it. That's in NCRA's charter, and certainly we're very much in favor of it when the need exists.
Thank you for saying that, but does that include Humboldt County too, or?
Well, Humboldt County would have to tax themselves if they want a train, just like Sonoma and Marin do.
Okay. All right, thank you. Appreciate it.
If there's no one else, then that concludes the public comments. We thank everybody for taking the time to share their opinions with us. We'll now go to the conduct of business. Mitch, would you like to proceed our action here?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The first phase of repairs of the railroad, of course, begins on the southern end of the line from the interchange at Lombard to Windsor, which is about a 62-mile stretch. That work consists of 4 primary contracts. Repair and replacement of about 55 crossing signals is one of the contracts. The so-called dewatering and repair of the Shelville levee is another discrete project. And then the repair of the timber bridges and the movable bridges, and finally the repair of the trackway. The Novato lawsuit resulted in an injunction being imposed by the court last February that permitted completion of the Shelville repairs and completion of what was about a $12 million contract to repair the signals, but prevented continued work on the bridges or the trackway contract. The November 3rd settlement with the City of Novato dissolved the injunction and allows the NCRA to finally award the trackway contract, which is what is currently before us. The bid opening took place on October 22nd. There were 5 contractors that bid to do the work. The low bid was submitted by a company called Balfour Beatty Rail, Inc. So upon the recommendation of the project manager and NCRA's on-call engineer, HNTV, staff recommends approval of the bid submitted by Balfour Beatty. And I'd like Dave to explain the distinction here, but the total bid price was $10,482,866 with a couple of options which resulted in a reduction to that price for a bid price of $8,722,646,000 once those adjustments are made. And I thought, if necessary, Dave could explain that adjustment.
Go ahead, Dave.
All right. The bid was structured to allow flexibility for award, and HNTV and John Williams and myself met. And what was bid was 2 alternatives with a base count of ties of 48,000. And so bid 1 was for hardwood ties, and bid 2 was for other than hardwood. What we also had in the bid, depending on how the bids were to come in, an option to add ties, knowing that 48,000 was sort of a minimum number of ties that we really needed to get the railroad up and running. So the recommendation for award is for the bid 2, the alternate bid 2, and it exercised an option for additional 10,000 ties. So what we are recommending is the $8,722,646 be awarded to Balfour Beatty. And I don't know if I said that quite right, but I'm open to any kind of questions you have.
Yeah, I think there's one thing missing here too. There's an amendment that was passed out here that has to do with the discussions we've had last week about financing. So
Okay.
why don't we go ahead and get that out here so everybody understands the whole picture right now and how this is going to be paid for.
Okay. When we bid this, we made it very clear to the potential bidders of the funding that this is through the CTC with Caltrans oversight, and that we are required to pay the contractor's invoice, and then we go through a reimbursement program process. And so we spelled that out and made it clear as a result of that, as a result of our ability to pay invoices, that the contractors were aware that there was about a $2 million limit on our cash flow. And that with $2 million and about 6 months for construction, everything would be just fine. If the contractor, for example, wanted to do it quicker, then our limitation would come into effect. And so the contractor is well aware of that limitation, well aware of this type of a funding arrangement, and is very comfortable with it. So in the event that the invoices become greater than what our cash flow allows, the contractor is willing to finance that if it need be. And those interest charges then would have to be borne by NCRA.
Thank you, Dave. We'll open it up for some questions now, and then we'll see if we can get a motion on the floor. Kelly?
Mr. Chairman, just on the first item, for clarity, then the recommendation is the hardwood ties plus the 10,000 extra ties?
No. The hardwood ties, it was in alternate 1. We're recommending alternate 2.
Which is the
which allows
ties plus the 10,000, the 48 plus 1,000 plus 10.
That's correct.
Okay, and on the financing side, we have this. I think really all we have, which is different, is the resolution for approval, which makes that modification. Have we had any discussions with the contractor if they do accomplish the job quicker, causing some financing issues, ranges of or caps on the financing that NCRA would be responsible for?
John Williams and I have entered into discussions with Belfer Beatty, and we have not heard back from them yet as far as what the financing arrangement would be. And so I believe this recommendation is for us to proceed with this award and allowing us to negotiate that.
Right. Effectively, we have financing internally if they go 2 months earlier, or 2.5 months earlier, or not, a month and a half earlier. My numbers are getting messed up there. 6 months versus if they did it in 4 months, you could see a little bit of a financing challenge. I mean, is there any conceivable way that they could finish it quicker than 4 months? Considering it's the winter time.
Right. Not really. And as part of the contract documents, requires the bidders to hold their bid for approximately 120 days. And when John and I discussed this with Belfer Beatty, they in fact saw a benefit to waiting until essentially February to start the contract, to allow for some upfront paperwork and for them to order materials.
And I didn't necessarily hear it in the discussion, but my understanding is it's in considering the state's financial situation that it's imperative on us to obligate the CTC funds. So, you know, my sense is we need to move forward with it today and accept the fact that we're going to get these tracks repaired.
Paul, I think one of the best clarification for what needs to be done other than the approval today is in the last paragraph of the document that was handed out here, which is the resolution. Basically, it leaves us a little latitude for me as the chair to work with council and our executive director to tweak the final details of the financing, not the structure of the deal as you're approving it. But we need some latitude to make that work, and we can't wait and have another board meeting a month from now because of what you just mentioned in terms of the deadlines for the CTCs.
All right. Thank you.
So we shouldn't wait, certainly.
Thank you.
No, go ahead.
Go ahead.
A couple of questions following up on Paul's point. Can we say to the contractor, please don't get it done early and therefore we will avoid paying interest charges?
No, not really. When they put the bid together, you know, part of their the process of putting together the cost is their overhead. And if you drag out a project, you would potentially incur additional overhead costs. So they have actually asked, and John and I suggested that if they were if they wanted to extend the bid, that we would consider that. But I don't think we want to ask them to, because I think then that opens us up to a change order request for additional overhead costs.
And for that matter, it's conceivable other bidders who didn't have this luxury would then come back and say, okay. But, so as I understood your discussion, you think that there won't be any interest charges if in fact they don't begin until February?
Well, if we can let the contractor do some upfront work between now and February, as far as the contract requires them a number of documents that they have to prepare. And if we could start going through that long process of reviewing their health and safety plan, for example, then we could get a lot of that out of the way so that when we give them the full notice to proceed, that they can start work immediately.
Will that result in interest charges accruing?
No.
Great. Two more things. One is, my understanding is that we actually have to go now to the CTC and say we weren't able to award this by October 31. We have, however, awarded it. The reason we couldn't is very good. We have an injunction.
Right.
We weren't able to. And as is discussed in recent open session with Caltrans there's every reason to believe that CTC will say, that's fine, NCRA, go ahead with it.
Excuse me, let me just clarify something if I can, Mr. Chairman. The position that we have gotten from Caltrans District 1 and CTC is if their suggestion to us was get on our schedule for our December 11th meeting if indeed you're not able to award this contract.
Get on CTC's
Yes,
December 11th.
yes. And they've got a long lead time, so we've had to submit materials to them to be on their time frame. But if we're able to award the contract prior to the December 11th meeting, there's no need for us to go back to the CTC.
That's a key bit of information that I didn't have. All right, so that eliminates my question, and I'll go on to the last, which is the letter we got dated October 24 from HNTB at the bottom, page 1, recommends that only one item of optional work be awarded. I'm sorry, so that's the 10,000 extra ties?
That's correct.
And in doing that, the ties, from my perspective, should last longer because there's more ties supporting each pound of whatever, I don't know quite how engineers do it, but each pound of weight that rolls across the tie. So will that prolong the life of these rope ties?
Potentially, yeah. I think more than the actual loads on the ties, the environment has a major impact. The quality of the roadbed for its ability to drain. So I really don't think that's going to have a huge impact.
But if to the extent it does, it's favorable. Okay, Mr. Chair, when we get to it, I'd like to make a slight change to the resolution.
Okay. Tom?
Just following up on...
I don't think your mic's on, Tom.
Following up on Director Meyer's comments on the useful life of ties, is there an appreciable difference between Douglas fir ties that we're recommending and the hardwood ties, other than price?
You know, it depends on who you ask, but the problem with hardwood ties in this environment is hardwood tends to split, and where Doug fir does not. So if you talk to John Williams, he would probably say that his experience with hardwood was not as favorable as his experience with Doug fir. So it kind of depends. It depends on who you ask and exactly where these ties are being placed. But we do not feel, HNTB or John or myself feel that we're really compromising. And we were just allowing that just to see what the price would be, because this is something that Smart would prefer, but that they're not paying the bill.
Which gets me to my next question, which revolves around Smart. Did they review this contract and the specifications, and are they in agreement with the 10,000 reduced number of ties, and did they have comment on the Doug fir versus hardwood? And
right.
Obviously, do we care?
We do care. Yes, the bid documents, the plans and the specifications were all reviewed by Smart's engineer. We addressed all of their comments, and one of their comments in general was to do less than more, because they're going to be coming through doing more. But they would prefer hardwood ties, and this is something that we're going to address with Smart as we proceed. It may require a change order.
I do have some concern about this interest charge financing and what as Director Kelly pointed out, I think he made reference to, what's the potential cap? Have we done even any back of the envelope sort of calculation of, are we talking something in the magnitude of $10,000 of potential interest charges, or $50,000? Because when you start thinking about $10 million times 5 or 6% for a month or two, the numbers, can be, there's a lot of zeros in there. So have we done any, even with no feedback from them, do we know whether this is a $100,000 commitment or a $10,000 commitment?
My understanding is we don't, and that would be the negotiation that will take place post this meeting over the next week or two. If it's a substantial amount that goes beyond the spirit of what this resolution says, we probably have to call another special board meeting. And so I think I'm not prepared to see us get out on a limb. I've seen some of the cash flow projections that Angel has worked on this thing, and it may be that it slides through with a very minimal amount of interest, I would guess. And it may be that we get lucky and there's no interest. So far, I don't see a huge interest bill on this, because a lot of the time in this period, there would have been no interest charge anyway. All we're talking about is the incremental additional time we need to get caught up with our cash flow caps, the limits that we have ourselves. But I don't think we can answer that. Maybe one of you guys have a better answer, but that's what we're going to be doing over the next few weeks.
Yeah, I think all I could add to that, Alan, is based on the cash flow analysis, it is very possible that there will be, depending on our actual ceiling of our bridge loan amount and the actual timing of the construction. So one of the benefits of actually postponing, if you will, this track notice to proceed until February is that we are starting, we've already started with the bridge work. And so the bridge work should be substantially complete by the time we start with the track contract. And that's a $4 million contract. So if we were, when we put this out to bid, that was one of our major concerns, that we were going to have all of this work going at the same time. But the way this is unfolded, it's very, very possible that we will not have any issue with the cash flow. But we wanted to make sure that our contractor was well aware of the process.
I think, Tom, too, it's important to consider that we're paying interest on our portion of this money anyway. We're paying it to John Williams, so it's a question of who do we pay it to. Now, if the period of time is longer, obviously that stretches it out. But if you take the peak off the cash need by stretching out the cash flow, I don't know. I mean,
you think I understand what you mean. Is that $2 million cash flow you're talking about? We're essentially paying interest on that.
That's correct.
And it's when it peaks, these occasional peaks come up. So it's not likely to be too much money to bell for it. But
we're hoping not, but again, that's what we'll be doing. And I think it's important too. We have an obligation to get this thing open, and we've got ships that are losing, huge amounts of money with inbound grain and lumber and stuff that we're paying surcharges on. So, to the extent that we can shoulder it, we should. I'm sorry, Bob.
Dave, what class and what maximum speed does the greater number of ties provide, and what class and speed does the lesser amount provide?
Lesser, I think I need some numbers. Are you talking, because what we're awarding is essentially, in round numbers, 60,000 ties, which is about 1,000 ties per mile. And again, depending on, as you well are aware, that there's different areas that the ties are probably better placed than others. But John's speed table, we're going to be able to allow him to run his operation as he has outlined that he's required, that he requires for his operations. Whether that's a class 2 or a class 3 at any particular place is yet to be seen once we actually do the work. But our intent is to get it to class 3.
Dave, if I could, just for clarification, the need for this additional marker in the game for additional ties not so much to improving the class as it does is making sure we've covered ourselves for the class that we're aiming for if we find more ties need replaced.
That's correct. We're not aiming for a class higher than class 3.
Well, I was just curious that we're providing a railroad which is more than adequate for what John needs. If SMART trains ever run and it requires something greater than that, that's up to them?
That is absolutely correct.
Good.
Mr. Chair, down there somewhere, I'll put the flashlight on it. I don't want to beat these poor ties to death. Okay, Dave, just out of curiosity, the projected useful life of these Dougford ties is?
I'm going to say somewhere between 25 and 30 years. You're going to say 40 years, John? But It's variable, but I'll let John respond to that.
Well, I think Dave's already given you the answer in terms of the life of ties, and which is better and which is not so good is partly an engineering judgment. And different railroad people with different experience have different answers. In my view, the primary determinant of the life of cross ties on this railroad is time. And 35 years is what I would expect the life of these cross ties to be. What we found, and we've walked the railroad, Jim Mahon and Dick Carter marked all the bad cross ties, and what we found and what they showed me was there are a number of hardwood ties that have only been in the track 10 or 15 years that are absolutely rotten. So we don't believe hardwood ties are appropriate for this piece of railroad. We have to work that out with SMART, but I don't think you're not changing the life of the cross ties when you select Doug fir versus hardwood. And we feel, NWPCO and our consultants and track experts just feel that the Doug fir is better suited for this territory.
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure that the projected life exceeded my projected life, so I wouldn't have to vote on it.
I was kind of thinking the same thing. Maybe we buy some used ties?
Anybody else have a question? Can we get a motion on the floor here? Still continue?
I'd like to move that we, it seems to me that the only thing actually we do have to vote on is the resolution. And I'd like to move the resolution that's been presented to the board, and I hope to the public. Heather, so the public have it? Well, let's put it out so the public sees it. But as to paragraph 2, I'd like to take into account the discussion we've had, which is that there may be some minor changes to the contract. It's the same discussion we have with the settlement, with the Noble lease, and with the workers' comp policy and many others we consider, which is that we give to the chair, to the executive director and council, and maybe you want to include Dave Allen or not?
Well, I think it's a given that.
Okay, so I'll stick with those.
That language is in the last paragraph.
Well, not quite. If it's there, I don't see it. So I'd like to change the language by adding at the end a brief part. And I'll read the whole second paragraph. The chairman of the board of directors is hereby authorized to execute the contract and to approve changes in the contract relating to the financing of the project, provided the chairman of the board of directors consults with the executive director and the general counsel in advance of executing any and all such changes, and then add, and they deem the changes to be minor. That would be my motion.
Second.
A second. Heather, for the sake of people here, this is a short thing. Would you mind reading the resolution so people out there know what we're talking about?
This is Resolution 2008-25, whereas a bid opening for the track rehabilitation program contract T1 and T2 was conducted at the office of HNTV Corporation on October 22nd, 2008, with receipt of 2 alternate bids by each contractor. Whereas 5 bids were submitted for the project: Shimmick Construction Company Incorporated, Stacy and Whitbeck Incorporated, Herzog Contracting Corporation, Balfour Beatty Rail and Railworks Track Systems Incorporated. Whereas the apparent low bidder for both alternate bids was Balfour Beatty Rail, whereas Balfour Beatty bid has been checked for completeness and accuracy and has been determined by HNTV to be a fair and reasonable bid. Now therefore be it resolved by the Board of Directors of the North Coast Railroad Authority as follows. The Track Rehabilitation Program Contract T1 and Track Rehabilitation Program Contract T2 shall be awarded to Balfour Beatty Rail, Inc. with the acceptance of alternate 2 bid from Balfour Beatty Rail, Inc. in the amount of $8,722,646 for the base bid of segments T1 T2, and the Caulfield Lane construction, which award shall include bid item 36. The chairman of the board of directors is hereby authorized to execute the contract and to approve changes in the contract relating to the financing of the project, provided the chairman of the board of directors consults with the executive director and the general counsel in advance of executing any and all such changes, and they deem the changes to be minor. Introduced and adopted this 12th day of November 2008 at a regular meeting of the board of directors of North Coast Railroad Authority by the following vote.
Does that incorporate what you?
Perfect.
Okay, we have a motion, a second. Do we have any other comments from the board members?
I'm going to vote for the motion. I have some qualms about doing so, and I expect it's shared by every director, which is, it's conceivable, as I understand it, that at some future point, SMART's going to come along and undo, not necessarily add to, but undo some of the work we're doing. If I knew that they were going to do that in the next 6 months, I'd vote against them. If I knew that they were going to do it in a year, I'd start thinking about it. But I don't know what it is that they're going to come along and do it, if at all. I'm going to assume that they are, but it's somewhere so far down the line that I'm willing to vote for the motion.
Thank you. Any other comments from directors? Are there any comments from the public on this matter?
Yeah, I'd like to make just a couple of comments, because when I moved from model trains to real trains, just like you, I've gone through a learning curve on, just what the engineering aspects are of railroads and railroad tracks. I'm a building contractor, and I know that if you have an old building and you have wood held in a situation where moisture is constantly held against it, it's going to rot. Similarly, if you have a bunch of wooden railroad ties, what it's resting on is the biggest impact, and Dave alluded to this, the biggest single impact to the life of the ties is what the gravel is like underneath it. And the tourist train study that was done here, they identified that the gravel that's underneath our tracks around the bay is basically river run, so it's rocks with sand and all kinds of dirt mixed in. The very best situation is gravel with no fines mixed in. In fact, it's crushed rock, because angular rock tamps together and it holds the ties in place. And what I was told by the engineer for the tourist train study was the river run rock, which is round rock, it's like marbles, it moves, and it also holds the moisture against the ties. And so one of the biggest single recommendations was that the whole railroad around the bay get an additional 6 inches of fresh crushed rock underneath it. So my understanding then with your issue with ties is a hardwood tie, or hardwood is stronger than softwood, although Douglas fir is your strongest construction lumber. Hardwood tie may be better on a mainline railroad where you get lots and lots and lots of heavy trains. It will resist the physical pounding better than a softwood tie. But in our situation, where for one, passenger trains don't have that kind of heavy load, and we won't have that many trains, really, I hope that the smart people are probably going to be going through their own learning curve. I'm sure things that they're talking about now will change also as they learn. So in the situation of trying to upgrade track, more ties is better. So you get them cheaper, you get more ties in, that's a good thing. I also know from talking with people, I like to rub elbows with the federal people, attended some seminars, and this railroad, because the earlier situations, the inspectors felt like they were snookered, that things were not done what they said that they'd do. We're going to be under a lot of scrutiny. So we got to make sure we, really meet the standards and do it all right. Thanks.
Thank you, Marcus. Some other comments?
Lawrence LaBranche. If SMART should decide to redo it with hardwood, do we see to make sure that we can reutilize those ties somewhere else? I don't know. It's thought about it.
It's a good question. Who holds titles to those ties when they go in? They're going into SMART's railroad. Are they theirs or ours once they're in there? They're theirs. So we certainly, if they were there, we're working as partners on a lot of this, so it's hard to say where the future is going. My understanding is they're going to add to what we put in there, not necessarily take everything out. So we'll see.
But I think we should follow up and tell staff that if in fact SMART takes it out. Let's see if we can get it back.
I think we'll be a little older before we have to ask that question. Thank you.
Could I ask a question for clarity, please? So if you're heading for Class 3, will that allow the tourist train around to operate on that, taking people?
Well, the tourist train can operate on anything above Class 1. It's a question of speed. I believe I'm correct on that. That's right.
So Class 3 is higher than
Yes,
the,
yes.
that's the way the order goes. Thank you, I appreciate it.
Go ahead, Bob.
Just a matter of history. I don't know what kind of hardwood they're talking about, but the NWP, 40, 50 years ago, undertook an experiment with hardwood ties, and it was terminated fairly quickly. Those hardwood ties were eucalyptus. Not only did the section men that had to handle those heavy things hate them, but they wouldn't stay in place. They split, they wouldn't stay straight, and that all results in a lot more maintenance to keep the track properly lined up. So I hope it's not eucalyptus you're talking about.
We're talking about Douglas fir.
No, that's not hardwood.
No, I know, but we're not putting in hardwood. We're putting in Douglas fir. Well, I'm going to call the question at this point in time unless there's anything important that the director wants to bring forward. All in favor? Aye.
Mr. Chairman, it's a resolution. Is it a roll call vote?
I'm glad you're here, Mr. Roberts.
Oh, no, I'm.
Quick, call the roll, Heather.
Director Simonson,
Yes.
Director Kelly,
Yes.
Director Woolley,
Yes.
Director Colfax,
Yes.
Director Olivier,
Yes.
Director Myers,
Aye.
Director McDonald,
Yes.
Director Zedrick,
Yes.
Chairman Hemphill.
Yes. Thank you. The motion carries. No one's opposed. I will now go to the second item, Mitch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As Dave mentioned previously, the injunction of February 6th prohibited repair of the timber bridges, and a $3.9 million contract was awarded last November for the timber bridge repairs. The settlement on November 3rd allows NCRA to have the bridge contractor Cooper Crane remobilize and resume the bridge repairs. And NCRA is also now in a position to award the small contract for the mechanical and electrical systems for the two swing bridges, Black Point and Haystack Landing. Two bids were submitted for this work. The bid opening was held back in January prior to the implementation of the injunction. And the low bidder was Summit Signal. We refer to this contract as S4. Staff recommends award of S4 in the amount of $92,112,000 to Summit Signal for repair of the mechanical and electrical systems on the two swing bridges. Haystack Landing, parallel to 101 in Petaluma, and the Black Point Bridge east of Highway 37 that crosses the Petaluma River.
Okay. Do you have anything to add to that, Dave?
No, I don't. I'd like to answer any questions, though.
So this is in addition to the awards that we already made that were just sequestered because of the injunction, and that construction is going forward now. This is not a part of that. This is an addition. Okay, open it up. Bernie?
It seems to me this is an appropriate award. But are there any problems caused by the delay of the award since you opened up the contracts in January and it's now in
The only issue would be whether or not the contractor would be willing to stand by his bid. And so we contacted Summit Signal, and they have agreed to signing this contract and keeping their prices the same.
Great, thank you. And last, HNTB makes 5 recommendations to the board in its letter of November 5. Have we gotten all of the material that they've suggested in that letter?
Not as of today. We are working on that.
So should we make the award dependent upon those 5 items, the signed documents, current insurance, performance bond, payment bond, and sureties?
Yes.
This is where the notice to proceed comes.
That's correct.
So if we simply say award the contract to Summit, is that included in whatever it is we're doing, or do we have to say something special?
No, the notice is given after they perform certain things that are called for in the bid documents.
Great, thank you.
Correct. Okay, we have a motion from
Second.
Director Woolley. We have a second. Any further discussion from the director? I'll do that. You guys first. You have anything more to say? Okay. Ask for any comment from the public. Okay, seeing none, we'll call for the question. I don't think this requires a roll call. It's not a resolution. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the award is approved. Now go to the consent calendar. Call for a motion to approve the consent calendar.
So
I'll second that. Does that include the changes submitted by Director Meyer?
Yeah, those have been circulated to the directors. If they're satisfactory, that would be part of the motion.
Yep, as long as the maker of the motion has that, fine.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, we have a motion, a second. Any other questions on the?
Mr. Chair, just a note on the special board meeting on the 27th. Since I left early, I'll abstain from that vote.
Okay, so noted.
Chairman, I'll have to abstain from the property committee for the same reasons I left earlier.
Did you catch that, Heather? Thank you. Bernie?
It seems to me both directors are free to do that, but they were there until almost the end, so they could vote on the portion that they were there.
Well, they're comfortable with it. I think we still got more than a quorum to vote. Okay, put a call for the question. All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
And note the abstentions. All right, at this point, we'll go to staff reports. We'll start with the Executive Director report from Mitch Stockner.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to briefly report on the draft environmental impact report for the first 142 miles of the railroad, which is the section we refer to as the Russian River Division. That environmental impact report, which is a huge comprehensive document, cost us about $3 million to complete, a little over $3 million, is ready for release. Our legal counsel and the Kleinfelder, who was the primary preparer of the EIR, its legal counsel, are poring over it one final time, and we expect release in about 7 to 10 days. That will trigger a 45-day comment period, within which will be a public hearing. Once response to the comments are complete, the board will then be in a position to certify the document if the board sees fit to do that. And that's generally where we are on the draft EIR for the Russian River Division.
And for clarity, for any of you who may not know what that is, that's everything from Lombard to Point to Willits, which has been determined to be a division with separate utility. Okay. Thank you, Mitch. Let's see any questions. Oh, here, Tom.
May I just ask one question? Where do we anticipate having that public meeting? And I would presume it would be someplace in the southern hemisphere of our sphere, since the EIR is about the southern hemisphere.
Yeah, we definitely will be in the southern hemisphere, and I think somewhere around Petaluma is what we were looking at. I think actually Angel has identified a location, I believe in Petaluma is what we're tentatively looking at.
And following the public comment period, the steps then are?
Following the public comment, well, 45-day public comment period. My understanding is then within that period of time, we develop a response to the commenters and have the public hearing Director McDonald referred to. And at the end of the 45 days, we're free then to come back to the board and request certification.
With possible changes, I would assume, as a result of public input. Thank you. Yeah, Bernie?
Mitch, at the conclusion of the EIR that you've just described, as well as two contracts that we approved today, how much money has the NCRA spent in the last 4 years to improve the line from Lombard to Windsor? And then how much for other areas? For example, I know we've improved the King Salmon area. You able to give us that?
Yeah, I can tell you that the handcuffs came off in April of 2006. That was when we got our first allocation from the CTC. And since that time, we have spent a total of about $35 million on repairs from Lombard to Windsor. That would include what we refer to as Project 32.9 under TCRP, which was $31 million, and Project 32.4, which we refer to as the emergency repairs due to the January 06 storms. That was about $4.9 million. And in addition to that, Fish and Game has authorized about $3 million to do the work, the dewatering and the work in Shelville. And those are our fund sources.
But there is money still going through the two. The total is, what, 70?
Well, the only thing left in TCRP is local match to the ICE-T, which is about $1.8 million, and the balance for the environmental consent decree, which is about $2.9 million.
And then, assuming that the contract work is timely done, when will a request be made to the FRA to lift its, I know there are two orders, but it seems to me only one deals with the southern hemisphere. But anyway, the southern portion, when will we make that request?
Well, it would be done by the operator, I would assume.
Well, that is the responsibility of the operator, and what FRA has told us is whenever we're ready for them to come in and inspect, give a thorough inspection to everything that they have jurisdiction over, including the grade crossing warning systems, the quality of the track, operational practices, and so on. We need to give them 30 days notice, and they've said they'd be here. I don't anticipate doing that till well into the spring. And after that point in time, assuming we accept the railroad from NCRA, then we, NWPCO, will be the operator of record. We'll be responsible for the safety of operations on the line. And that's what has to happen.
Thank you.
Mitch, going back to your doing the numbers on your fingers and toes, included in that 30-some-odd million was King Salmon, and also we spent money for the beginnings of the environmental studies of the canyon.
Yeah, that's included as part of the 31 million under 32.9, the EIR that I mentioned, about $3 million for an EIR is part of that total, part of that $31 million total. King Salmon was one of the emergency repair projects that we did under 32.4. That was about $690,000.
When do we get the money for the $3 million that we spent in the canyon? When do we see the product?
When will we see it?
Yeah.
The bulk of it is the draft EIR that we'll be releasing. In addition, we have a geotechnical study and a mapping of the canyon. That's a separate project.
Right, that's what I was referring to.
Okay.
Yes, I think I reported at the last board meeting that I now have the mapping and I have the draft geotechnical report, and I've got through maybe about 50% of it as far as my review. The activities over the last couple of months have been priorities, and that has not been a priority. So I anticipate after we get these, now that we've got all of our contracts designed and awarded, basically, that over the next month or so, I'd go back, finish my review, get my comments off to John Williams and HNTB, so they get it back to the geotech, and then they could issue the final report.
Thank you.
But that isn't part of the EIR that we're going to deal with?
No, that was, I think Mitch lumped them together, and it was a smaller part. I don't remember how much we spent on the canyon portion of that.
Yeah, actually, the EIR, Russian River Division, and the notices of exemptions for the repairs, all the work on the south end totals a little over $3 million to do all of that. The mapping and the geotechnical study, we have at our disposal about $840,000, separate from that.
Thank you.
One of these days we should, in a little more formal way, have those numbers and put them on the website so that the people of the state of California can see what's happening with their tax dollars.
Seems like a reasonable request.
Yeah, that would be easy enough to do. I've actually made many a chart over the last 4 or 5 years on this, and we certainly can do it again.
The other important amount, if you're adding, is the alternate project funds that were invested in the FEMA projects on the south end. They were substantial, I believe, what, $8 million or so?
The FEMA projects?
Yeah.
No, when was that?
Well, I think he's referring to, it was about 7.9,
Okay.
and that included some repairs to the 2 swing bridges,
Oh,
equipment acquisition, rail car acquisition.
Go ahead, Mitch. I didn't mean to sidetrack you.
That was all I was going to say about the EIR. Now we go to the draft trail guidelines. The draft guidelines were distributed at our meeting here in Humboldt County last August. At that time, the board established a comment period that would close October 31st with a target date for adoption of the guideline. We said hopefully in December. That was our target. We've received a lot of comments. Over 20 agencies have commented. A number of individuals have commented. In addition, prior to the close of the October 31st comment period, the State Coastal Commission requested an extension of the comment period to December 15th. Under the circumstances, what staff recommends is granting the time extension to the Coastal Commission and recommends delaying we recommend delaying any action on the proposed trail guidelines until early next year so that staff and the operator can fairly evaluate all the comments before making a final recommendation to the board, and so that we can consider the Coastal Commission comments as well.
Certainly seems to make sense to me. I'll open it up to any comments directors may have.
Do you want to talk about the Coastal Conservancy letter now, Mr. Chairman?
But we're speaking of the Coastal Commission. They wrote us a letter requesting, and I think that's in the file,
Yeah.
requesting that we delay. They indicated that they kind of been left out of the loop, and they had some very strong opinions about things.
So I agree with the staff's position, and I thought through December was just fine. In fact, I think we might want to, in our letter, apologize for not formally requesting their input, and ask if they have any suggestions in addition to the many agencies that we sent it to, and why didn't you send it out in the letter so that they can see that we didn't try and slip it by them. And then note on our website that we're extending the closing.
Yeah, I think it's a given that Mitch is communicating, and in there, sorry we didn't tell you, I think is appropriate. But no problem in putting it on the website, is there? We'll announce the extension there anyway, so.
Yes, no, we will put it on the website.
Invite any other comment in the meantime. I see nobody shaking their head no, so if we'll open this, I know there's interest on the bike issue. I think this obviously gives more time for consideration, so if there's anybody here from who wants to speak on the bike issue, this would be the appropriate time. Trail, not bike.
Thanks for allowing me. My name is Jen Rice, and I run a part of the nonprofit Redwood Community Action Agency here in Humboldt County. And we build multi-use trails and are frequently involved with encroachment permit requests from Caltrans and other agencies. And we work with a lot of the local governments. And you received a letter from 16 different organizations and local jurisdictions between San Francisco and here. And I just wanted to briefly summarize those key points and some points that the County Public Works Department made that I'm hoping that you're considering in adopting these guidelines. I appreciate you hearing us now because I'm not sure that I'll be able to just talk with you before you come back to Humboldt County. So I just wanted to note that your staff and contractor and yourselves have brought up concerns for safety of trails in railroad corridors, and in that letter was summarized research that the Federal Railroad Administration, their Office of Safety, have conducted, where they found that 619 fatalities happened last year from trespass in railroad corridors across the country, and that 469 of those were not at crossings. So what we would like you to consider is that trails in many cases may increase safety by keeping people in a dedicated public use right-of-way separate from a rail corridor. That's one point. Another request that letter made is this group of cities and counties and organizations up and down the line agreed that what we would like to request is a standard that requires use of best practices, information, and not setting specific setback requirements for trails, because all of our scenarios are so different in Ukiah and Willits and Arcata, Rio Dell, and there are some documents out there that provide very good technical analysis of best practices around the country in terms of trail setbacks from railroad rights-of-way. And we're hoping that what you can do in your guidelines is just say you're going to base those decisions on those best practices scenarios and not set hard setback requirements that have X number of feet in every situation, because we, and as County Public Works, Humboldt County Public Works pointed out in their letter, it's just, if you set those rigid requirements, they may not be achievable and it might cause more work. And then something that's very important to me as someone who does a lot of collaboration and communication with various local government agencies is the clarity about who we're communicating with. When I, or the City of Eureka, or the County of Mendocino asks to build a trail in a railroad right-of-way, these guidelines say that it's either or NCRA or the Northwestern Pacific Company. And I'm hoping that you can just set that as communicating with your body, the NCRA, and attaining that permit, negotiating on standards with the assurance, obviously, that you folks will be communicating with your contractor, but I'm hoping it can be a very clear relationship that we would go to the NCRA, apply for that permit, get those specifications very clearly from you. It also mentions, and that's brought up in items 1.1.2, 1.3.2, and 2.2.2. It all says either or. You might be negotiating with NCRA or Northwestern Pacific Company. In item 1.4.3, it brings up that trails would need to meet NCRA standards, PUC standards, and Northwestern Pacific Company standards. And I'm just not sure how those standards of your contractor are set, how they change. And so as cities and as organizations who are building trails, we just want to be sure that we're using usually grant-funded resources where they want assurance that their money is going to be spent and maintained, over a period of time. And if we can't tell them what those standards will be over time or how to negotiate them, that will raise a problem, I think, for us. So just when Northwestern Pacific Company's standards are set as something that trails are going to have to meet, I think just calling out what the process is about how those standards are made, either that or just saying it's NCRA and PUC standards in consultation with your contractor. So those are my comments. If you have any questions, let me know.
Are you going to put those in writing too?
Yes, those are all in writing in letters from our various organizations and from the county, and I think Pat Whitting's office as well. So
thank you for your
thank you.
Chairman?
Yes.
I'd like to take the opportunity to maybe question Jan a bit. Certainly. We don't get her too often here. First of all, Jan, I want to say thank you. I know you've been involved in the Annie and Mary kind of behind the scenes, and I'm sure our other directors appreciate all your efforts that you've done there. You mentioned that having a dedicated corridor would possibly actually save lives. I hope I got that concept correctly. Are you aware of any studies that actually show that, or is that just logic? And it seems logical to me. I think I understand the concept. But are there actually concrete studies that demonstrate that?
The study that I mentioned is from the Federal Railroad Administration, and it doesn't specifically look at trail effect on safety, and that's something that we, as a group of these 16 agencies and organizations, have been actively looking for. So I can't tell you that we have found the specific studies yet. What we were trying to get close to here is how many times are pedestrians or trespassers hit in corridors where whereas a trail and a fencing type of or some sort of setback situation might alleviate some of those dangers, but we haven't found, as of yet, those specific studies, unless, I don't know, Chris Rawl might have found some in the interim, but I'm not aware of them yet. And we're asking the Rails and Trails Conservancy to help us advance some of that research and maybe collect it for this effort.
Okay, one other thing, if you indulge me. You mentioned best practices guidelines and hoping for us to integrate that. Did your letter, because I don't think I've read it, has your letter actually maybe come up with actual wording that we could put in our guidelines?
Yes.
That would make it a lot easier for us.
It does recommend wording for sections 4.3.3 and 4.8.1, which are both sections that specifically describe setbacks as they're set now. And what we recommend is generally referencing the Federal Highway Administration set of best practices and the Rails and Trails Conservancy's study, and it specifically calls out those two documents as resources. And it's set in it. What the letter does is advocates for some draft language for your guidelines.
Thank you.
Thank you.
As you may have gathered, we haven't seen all the letters, pretty much none of the letters so far on this, and that's because staff is going to give it to us in due course. Best practices is somewhat indefinite. In your material, do you give us what best practices might be in particular situations?
You know, the interesting thing about convening a conference call with people between San Francisco and Humboldt was trying to come up, our initial effort was to try to find some number that we could recommend. And everyone had such different opinions about what would work in their community, we couldn't find it. So I know the County Public Works letter calls out the situation where they found that the best practices analyze a 10-foot setback as one of the minimum setbacks, and they call that out specifically. But the letter from the 16 jurisdictions and organizations together does not call out specific.
So if we make use of this federal highway information that you're giving us, will we be able to determine for a specific location what it is that we should have in the way of a setback?
That document calls out all sorts of scenarios, and it analyzes setback standards and guidelines in a whole variety of states and with different railroads across the country. So it provides examples of what's been done in lots of different situations. And it also calls out cross-section scenarios where it has different types of layout scenarios. So I think to some extent I would answer yes to your question, but it's not a direct relationship between if you have this scenario, then you should have this setback.
I echo Director McDonald's thanks with respect to the A&M line.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Chris Rawl. I'm Executive Director of Green Wheels. We're Humboldt's advocate for transportation choices. I guess first I wanted to address whether I was familiar with any particular studies that specifically show that trails improve the safety in a given track, and I'm not aware of any that specifically show that with a direct comparison. In our written comments specifically from our organization, as well as I believe in the sign-on letter, there's language from the Rail with Trail Lessons Learned report that shows that they studied 61 rails with trail and found an extremely low number of incidents. I think it might have been only one incident that didn't occur at a crossing in all 61 rail with trail projects that they studied. So there's certainly heuristic evidence, even if there hasn't been a specific look at comparing railroads where there is no trail versus where there is. These facilities are extremely safe when they're designed properly. Let's see. So we did submit written comments, and we were also signatories on that sign-on letter that you guys received. I think there's specific information there about how to address the guidelines. I kind of wanted to go a little bit further and talk a little bit about how this relates to some other events going on. It is good to hear, at least I've heard through the grapevine, that these guidelines will not apply in the SMART-owned corridor, that they will be able to do their project as they've planned. I hope that is indeed true. Measure Q, which just passed down in Sonoma Marin, is a great project. It's going to be a 70-mile rail with trail project, essentially, from Cloverdale to Larkspur. And in a sense, SMART has really set the bar and demonstrated what it takes to get a project rolling with broad community support, and also shown what a region might expect from a modern transportation project in this era of change. We look forward to the NCRA following in SMART's footsteps, embracing the change in direction this historic election will bring on many levels. An NCRA committed to building a rail with trail facility in the Humboldt Bay region that serves both goods movement and non-motorized transportation needs, akin to the gold standard set by SMART, is the way forward for the NCRA in order to gain broad public support required to rebuild this railroad. While we don't have a population density to support passenger rail, we do love our walking and biking, and we expect nothing less than what Marin and Sonoma just got. SMART was in the railroad business, but they saw the need to gain broad support for their project. NCRA can do the same, and we look forward to seeing it happen. Now that we see what SMART is doing, having a rail with trail for the entire length of the NCRA corridor within the Humboldt Bay region, built by the NCRA, just as SMART will now build theirs, is a win-win. And we don't see why NCRA would approach it any other way. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
I'm P.A. Winterson, and I'm a Eureka person, and I'm also a Green Wheels person as well. I echo everything that Jen Rice said and that Chris Rawl said. And it is the case that we really can do both of these things, and we really should reach for the moon. Like Patricia Daly thinks, we should be able to get everything, because there's no reason why we shouldn't, And we actually do have the ability to do this, and we just have to believe it and do it, because it's so here, and it's so the future. And if we're not going to have people on those rails, we may as well have people next to the rails. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just want to reiterate our support for both the rail with trail concept and actually when the National Park Service sent me an application, I called up Jen Rice and at that time Councilmember Dave Reserve in Arcata and said, I just got this application. The Park Service is really interested in creating a trail team for this trail between Arcata and Eureka. And that's what really started this. And I knew that there would be controversy, and so that's why I thought we needed to get going on figuring out how to do with both and for both. I'd say, and for people that say, we're not talking about people on the rails, that's what our tourist train is about, is putting people on the rails. And I've always said that, if we build some platforms for the tourist train, certainly, other types of passenger trains could use that same infrastructure too. For somebody that's myself, our organization looking at maintaining track, this discussion about replacing ties is very poignant in that ties are 8 feet long. And so you got to be able to yank those things out and put new ones in. And so the 10-foot setback that I hear discussed here, that sounds like a reasonable minimum to me. You got to have enough room to pull ties up. Also, just something I wanted to have said earlier, when I was at this convention, I talked to a railroad engineering outfit, and they expressed to me, railroads are under federal jurisdiction, and there actually was a bit of concern with the NCRA not invoking that federal privilege and the precedents that sets. So what is done here has impact and ripple effects throughout, what's going on with railroads all over. And so I do believe in we need to be a good neighbor. I support trails, and I hope that you always remember that as a railroad, you have certain exemptions and umbrella protection under federal laws, and not to give in too easy. And I know that Arcata got the money to go ahead and start the trail from Arcata to the Breacut Marsh. The Trails team has identified that as probably the best standalone project, so even if nothing else gets built, that in itself is a justifiable project, and so they did get the money for that. And I would ask the trail supporters, because I've seen some of the rhetoric that is basically saying Arcata had to spend, is having to spend an extra $1 million to build around a dead railroad. I would hope that that type of inflammatory stuff would be quieted down. I really do hope that we can have people working together to have a win-win of both green railroad technology and trails, so that we truly do, if you're about having transportation choices, we do have all the choices. So I'd just like to say that to the community of people here in Humboldt County. And actually, there was somebody from an HSU publication called me up, and I know talked to various people about this, and that person said, what I get from is that the rail and trail thing does have broad community support. And I hope that that common sense approach does prevail. I hope that the rhetoric can get calmed down, because, it bothers me when I hear that kind of stuff and read it. Thanks.
Thank you.
Jerry Tomzak again. I'd just like to make a comment about no people on the rails and our tourist and excursion train expectations. Durango, Colorado has a population of 15,500. It's in La Plata County with 44,000 total residents. And the nearest big city is 336 miles away, which is Denver. During the Durango Herald reported that during the months of June, July, and August of 2008, this train had 83,383 riders. That's a lot of people. And for as rural an area as it is, it's not connected to any major highways that I know of, because I've been there. The Skunk train, operating between Willits and Fort Bragg, claims a ridership of about 60,000 annually. This is impactful as far as the communities are concerned, because tourism brings a lot of revenue to the area. In Stone Consulting's study, I believe it was done in 2003 for the city of Eureka, they estimated that our break-even point for a railroad, it would be about 35,000 riders. So I don't, and this equates to quite a bit of revenue for our area. And we have done our own business plans, and we have verified the fact that we could break even at 35,000 riders, and might do a little bit better. Just to add to that, I'd just like to point out something about the Caltrans did a study for us, or they have counters set up south and north of Eureka. And during August, there are 6,000 more vehicles per day that pass through Eureka than in January. 6,000 more vehicles. If you just figure out, that's per day. Now, if you just figure that out, it's quite a few vehicles per month. And if we get a few more of those people to stop and spend a day overnight with us in Humboldt County, it would bring a lot of revenue to our community. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, your final item on your staff report is the ICA funds.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be very brief. On October 14th, the staff had a conference call with Caltrans District 1 and Federal Highway Administration, to be exact, to discuss an application for what is a total of $11.1 million in so-called ICE-T funds that were designated for the NCRA in 1996. We submitted a conceptual proposal which requests use of the funds to address the mitigations that are called for in the Nevada lawsuit and funding for the next phase of the repairs from Windsor to Cloverdale. It was a very productive meeting. We were advised that we needed to complete an audit that was initiated by Caltrans Audits Division last year, which Heather is trying to schedule with Caltrans Audits. And we were advised that we had to complete a detailed scope of work, including the plans and drawings in some detail of what we contemplated for the repairs. Dave has completed those drawings, I believe, and has submitted them to Caltrans, and we're going to have a follow-up meeting with them shortly.
Yes, I'd like to just kind of follow up on what Mitch just said. I have completed a draft of these plans, and rather than sending them to Caltrans for their review, I've hopefully set up a meeting for 3:30 this afternoon to meet with their engineer, just to go informally over the plans, make sure that what we're going to be submitting is what they're expecting. So we've got a draft set of plans, and I'm hopefully reviewing that this afternoon with Caltrans.
Good work. Mitch, just going back, John reminded me of something. I don't think we can just slide this extension question on the draft trail guidelines without some formal action, or...
Yeah, I'm sorry, I skipped over that, didn't I? Staff was recommending that we consent to extend the comment period to December 15th as requested by the State Coastal Commission for the trail guidelines.
Okay, do we have to go back and approve this as an agenda item, or?
It's already
all right, so we have a motion to...
Second, and I assume the motion took into account all the things we discussed. Thank them for...
Yes, staff's been given direct.
Apologize and ask any other places that we missed out on.
Any comments on the motion? Any questions from the public on this? We've already done that. All in favor? Aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Again. Project manager report.
Yes.
Show and tell.
Yeah, I've got a few things to update, so I'll go through this quickly because a lot of these you've seen before. But the basic agenda is to go over the contracts that we have under construction. And Mass Electric was awarded signal contract 1 and 2, and we are still awaiting the preemption. I'm not sure how to get rid of this little thing right here. There we go. We're still waiting the preemption coordination with Caltrans, and I'm setting up a meeting hopefully next week to resolve those 3 signals. And these are some of the examples I've shown in the past. Those are all substantially complete that I just flashed through. S2, we still have the 5 signals remaining. That basically it's one in Windsor, River Road, and then in Petaluma we have Washington, D, Hopper, and Caulfield. And these are all basically awaiting equipment. And these, not just to bring out, as I did last time, that these little blue things are actually the black box is oops, I didn't mean to do that. Sorry about that. But that is a what they call a shoot. It's a predictor, and it enables us to have a constant warning at all of the crossings, which is an important item for quiet zones. King salmon is complete. I think the last time I showed some of these final putting the track back in place, and that's our dump truck there, and our excavator in the background that the contractor rented from us. So that's a little bit, that's before, and this is basically the same place. We're doing the final ballasting, and there are some overall completions. The Shellville embankment, as I reported last time, is essentially all of the embankment is constructed, and I'm meeting tomorrow with the contractor to go over some slope protection to get us through the winter.
Tim, go back to that last
Sure.
slide. It shows a change order there with a $300,000 number. Where's that money come from?
That comes from the TCRP 32.4.
Okay, we had it. It's in the budget.
That's in the budget. It's primarily, I mean, that's a fairly large change order, and it's primarily due to the fact that we left the contract, and then we had these storms in 2005, 2006 that required substantially more work, but it's the same work. T3, which is a timber contract, which 42 bridges. We've completed the railroad slough in Wingo, and I've got some photos here of the latest Nevada Creek here. But I just wanted to bring out, these are all in-kind repairs, bring it up to the original design capacity. And when we're over waterways, we are replacing creosoted members with non-creosoted members for environmental reasons. This is showing these non-creosoted, even though they look like the creosoted, but they are not. But those are new members, new cap beams on that particular bridge, which happens to be going over railroad slough. This is kind of an uncommon site for Nevada Creek, but the county, the flood control, Marin County, every 5 years or so they go through and they do dredging. So they dammed the creek downstream from our bridge, so we had a perfect environment in order to get out there and do our work. We got that carved out of the injunction. We were able to get in and do repairs, including replacement of members like this and splicing some of these piles. There's a pile splice in action or in process. There you can see where we're removing the superstructure. Most of the substructure now is repaired before we did that. Here, this is a spliced pile. Now you can see here some of the repaired piles, using cross bracing, and we're now awaiting the superstructure, which should be out there in the next 30 to 40 days. And once we got the substructure work done, then the county took out the earthen dam and we flooded Nevada Creek. Brazos Bridge, we had copper thieves, and the last episode we were able to actually capture the thieves in action, and they are in jail. There's 3 of them were captured.
Where's the copper?
The copper, I mean, they had some copper actually in their possession. That's how we were able to arrest them and put them in jail. This bridge is going to be a key for our track contractor to bring in ties and other materials and equipment. So we inspected the bridge, and it's because of the copper thieves, we can no longer do this electronically, but there's a backup with a mechanical backup. So we made repairs to the gas-powered engine. We got the Coast Guard to come out, and we actually lowered the bridge. This is the mechanic. This is the machinery. We had to replace these valve covers, and that is the bridge all the way down. Almost. We did not put the span locks in at this point, but so we were successful in actually lowering it all the way and bringing it all the way back up. That's it.
Very good, Dave. Does that conclude your report?
That's it.
Thank you. We'll have no legal counsel report today because Chris is preoccupied with the joining us in closed session telephonically. Operator report, John.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Back in January, NWPCO, as the prospective operator of the railroad, filed an application with the FRA to discontinue the interlocking devices on the 3 movable bridges, which is Brazos, you just saw, White Point, and also the Haymarket Bridge. For reasons unknown to me, somewhere within the halls of the FRA, the application languished for a long time. Ultimately, FRA asked for additional information, and the additional information that I provided them was a letter from SMART that agreed to the discontinuance of all 3 interlocking devices. And I'm advised this morning that FRA has published in the Federal Register, as of today or yesterday, the docket announcement that they will take comments on my request for reconsideration of the discontinuance for a period of 45 days. Then they expect to issue a decision. So I think we'll have a decision one way or the other in 45 days now. That was only a year. I wanted to say, just for clarification, because the technical aspects of running a railroad and the safety regulation may not be clear to all the board members. What happens as the railroad is the responsibility for operating the railroad is transferred to NWPCO in accordance with the terms of our lease, is that NWPCO will be responsible as the operator of record to the FRA, to the PUC, and to their joint jurisdiction on all matters of safety. Now, this transfer, you understand, will occur between Windsor and Lombard. So NWPCO, as we were contracted to do, will become the operator. North of Windsor, NCRA is still the holder of all the property and is responsible for all the property. but with an eye toward, in terms of the lease, at some point, NWPCO would assume operations of that. So when you see something like the trail guidelines, and they refer to the operator or NCRA, it is a complex and confusing thing, because NCRA will have responsibility for the safety on some portions of the railroad. NWPCO will have responsibility for other sections of the railroad. And so I wanted to clarify that, if it's of value. Now, with SMART's victory at the ballot box, the picture gets even more confusing, because SMART ultimately will become the operator of record on property that it owns from Healdsburg down to Larkspur. SMART doesn't intend to operate from Ignacio to Lombard, so that will continue to be NWPCO's responsibility. And in the interim period, FRA only allows one operator of record. So in the interim period, until SMART actually starts operating trains, I will be placed in what I consider to be the enviable position of being the operator of record on the SMART-owned lines. Nonetheless, Dave and I both spend a lot of time with SMART's engineering person, who's been helpful to us in most cases. I should say that SMART may have won the election, but they don't really have a plan yet. They're trying to determine what their priorities are. They're trying to determine who's going to do an operating plan for them, the negotiation with NCRA and NWPCO, and what their priorities are. For example, they could spend a lot of money right now and replace some bridges while there are no trains running. That would make a lot of sense, right? Well, they may or may not decide to do that. But my point is that as we go forward in time, SMART's game plan will become more certain, more observable, and more concrete. And we're talking to them. They understand what we're trying to do. Remember, they do intend to operate 5 or 6 years in the future. They're not talking about operating next year or 2 years from now. They're talking 5, 6 years in the future. So meanwhile, we intend to run our freight train, cooperate with them as they try and bring the railroad up to a much higher standard of operation than we need for freight. And to your point, Bob, yes, they pay for it, anything higher than what we need. Last thing I wanted to say was there was a discussion earlier today about interest. There's always interest. The reason NCRA has to pay interest on all this rehabilitation project is because Caltrans requires the contractors to be paid prior to reimbursement. So there's always interest under that scheme. I am paying the interest for you now as I provide a bridge loan. But if we can get a contractor to finance the work, get the work done faster, and if he doesn't charge an exorbitant rate of interest, why not use his money? So there's always interest. Any one of you reads the papers, you know how unsettled the credit markets are. If you followed this week, American Express, one of the great companies in the country, declared itself a bank holding company. So they could access the credit markets for $3.5 billion because they have no other access to money. We're very fortunate so far. Yes, our credit has been limited, but so far we've been able to get credit at what I consider a very reasonable price. And if we can get Balfour Beatty to help us, and I hope we can, then that would be advantageous to all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Before you leave, I just think it's important for the board to understand that the construction that's taken place to date could not have happened without the bridge financing that John's company put forward. There was no way around this. We tried to get private money, got in touch with a bank. We tried to work with the county of Sonoma. They said thank you and tiptoed away from it, and he's the only guy that stepped up to the plate. So for all the money in the world in the state pipeline on a reimbursement program, you got to have the bridge financing, and John has provided it, and we owe you for that, John. Thank you.
Thank you. I didn't ask to be your banker. Well, I started out to be your operator. So if someone can substitute for me, I'd be quite happy to relinquish that.
I haven't seen anybody running in the door with a checkbook. So. Any questions of John? Seeing none, thank you, John. We're now going to go to closed session.
For matters from the board.
Oh, I'm sorry. Let's skip right over it. Matters from the board.
I have two quick things. One is, I would suggest, given what Mr. Williams talked about, the financial crisis that we're going through, economic problems, that we schedule for December, or a future meeting, a possible cutback in the director's stipend and other ways in which to save money for the NCRA. And second, for those that have that requested, could we please get a conformed copy of the court order that settled the bottom lawsuit? I wondered whether my memo to our counsel, Mr. Neary, has been provided to the other directors. If it hasn't, I would like it to be provided to them. It raises an issue that we want to discuss, not so much for the settlement, which is already done, but for the renegotiation of the lease. And I wondered why it is that the Department of Fish and Game objected to the entry of the settlement. Is that something that...
I think that's a mistake. I think that was our friend from the AG's office that overstepped herself. Correct me, Mitch, if I'm wrong on that. I wish Chris were here.
Yeah, I think I can give you a layperson's explanation, which is we, of course, since 1999 are under the responsibility to complete an environmental consent decree that was entered by Superior Court in Mendocino County. We've done the surface cleanup for that, where we've requested funds for the subsurface cleanup. We are answerable to 3 separate state agencies and the Attorney General's office in terms of our progress that we make on that. And we have heard nothing that suggests that we haven't been doing our level best to complete that consent decree. And efforts continue to comply with that consent decree. Basically, what the Attorney General's office, in the form of Rose Fua, who is the attorney that represents the 3 state agencies in the AG's office, did was to send a letter to Judge Ritchie that basically said, I note that in the settlement agreement you give priority on the use of ICE-T funds to the improvements that are within the settlement agreement, that is the quiet zones and the landscaping and the fencing. And her suggestion was what ought to be in first place is projects that comply with the consent decree. And this, I think, I'm hearing anecdotally that was a fairly surprising development given the 2 other attorneys from the AG's office, Mr. Getz, who represents Fish and Game officially in this case, and Mr. Spanos, who represents CTC for the AG officially in this case, are both supportive of the settlement. So this was a contradictory message that was sent by an element of the AG's office that may or may not have been authorized. And in any case, the judge rejected it. Thank you.
One more thing. What response, if any, has the Attorney General given to our request, which we discussed, I think it was the April Petaluma meeting, regarding having Directors Myers and McDonald participate or not in settlement discussions with the Mata lawsuit. It isn't moot, as you pointed out, Chair, during that meeting. Something of similar nature could come up for any of the other, for Marin as well as any of the other counties in a similar setting, and I wondered what the status was.
I think we'd have to ask Chris. I know that the request was submitted, and we were kind of told it might take a year before it comes out the other end. So, that's not a good answer, but that's the answer we got. So perhaps we can have that as a separate question to Chris. Any other directors' comments? Just, I'd like to throw one in here. We're struggling with these trail issues, and I think trying to do the right thing. And obviously, anybody who bikes or walks, which I do, I don't bike anymore, but I walk a lot. Trails are precious, but the focus has been on safety, and I think that's an appropriate place to be, but it also obscures the other issues that need to be looked at, and I think are going to have to be looked at in the context of the time. Two of them are legal, our responsibilities to our operator in terms of what we're delivering to him in terms of the lease agreement. The other one is the legal nature of our charge based on the statutes that formed us and what we're able to do or not do. And then the final one that has been obscured here is the question of the finite capacity of the railroad and our stewardship of that capacity, whether it's potential or actual now. And I think that we're going to have to do a little harder work on making sure that we've answered all those questions before we can legitimately do the planning. It isn't just a question of best practices as it relates to safety. I think that's what's taken the forefront because that seemed to be the most responsible thing to do. We don't want to be killing people, but I think there's so many different opinions on that that even when you get over that, you still have some other remaining issues that you need to be thinking about and we need to drill into as a responsible agency. So I just bring this up, not that I have any answers to it right now, but it's on the list of things we're going to have to address before we can resolve this issue. And John?
In that we're extended the deadline to December 15th, and the board will be meeting just before that. So obviously we still will not have been completed in our public gathering of public information. So then I think we ought to not necessarily start commenting on incomplete data, but maybe on the process by which we're going to resolve some of this. To some degree, it's almost like I'm sad, concerned that we even asked for guidelines, because it's so much of a case-by-case kind of condition that I'm learning just from the input that we've gathered so much, but we do need them at the same time. So I'm hoping staff can help us, give us a process we can follow, taking into accord our chairman's just now comments about how we review these things, because the public trust responsibilities we have for the railroad are clear. It's just that how do we share that right away that's unclear. And again, I believe it's really a case-by-case basis. Maybe there's some thought that you'd be putting into this beforehand. How you're going to wrestle with this would be really kind of good for us to hear at our meeting in December.
Thank you, John. Anybody else? Okay, we will now go to closed session. Chris is not here yet to make his usual optimistic estimate as to how long we'll be in there, but if we're not going to be back here by 2:30, we'll send somebody out and get them to the public and they want to stick around.